All right, I think it's time. Let's see if I can turn my video on. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is our last day home stretch. Welcome to the Trusted Execution Environment and Provisioning Working Group. Hopefully you can hear me now. Let's go ahead and get started. I think most of you are very familiar with the note well with respect to the IPR and how we conduct our business here. One thing that we wanted to call out is the code of conduct we want to follow. This is based on RFC 7154. And to summarize here, it's basically for us to treat each other with respect. We are all professionals coming in with our own point of view and diverse backgrounds. So we should keep our discussions more of an impersonal and to the point as we're working to define solutions that will interoperate across the globe. Okay. So given that, I will thank Hannes in advance. I've got the links here. Good to see you. I've got my co-chair with me here, Tiru. And I've just noted the links here for the meeting materials as well as the note-taking. I forgot to update. No, I think the minutes link is correct. So thank you, Hannes, for being our note-taker. I encourage everyone else, it's a live document, to go to the CodeMD or whatever it's called now, Hedge Talk, and help out. And Tiru, if you can also help us recording, that will help. Sorry if I got the title slide wrong, Hannes. What did I do? Yeah, okay, my bad. I'll do better next time. Okay, so, oh, shoot. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so agenda for today. We've got Akira providing us the hackathon. We still have our architecture and protocol drafts have been submitted to publication. For today, we've just got the hackathon report. Akira, I've got you, and I think you've embedded them in your slides to talk about the suit and TEEP. I think that was also part of your hackathon, but there's a GitHub request for this, and then the rest of the time we'll spend talking about the protocol. See, I'm like not awake. It should say protocol, not architecture. My bad. So barring those updates, any other agenda bash? Going once, going twice. All right, so Akira, do you want me to share your slides?
No, I think I would like to share my screen.
Okay, go for it.
Then I could flip the page. Is my screen showing right now?
No, we just see your video.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I think the chairs will need to approve sharing.
Nancy, you should accept his request to show either desktop or the preloaded slides.
Got it.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see two icons for the share.
Yes, this is because he asked to share desktop and
Yeah.
then clicked on the other icon. You can deny the other request.
Okay, I've tried to accept both. I see your slides now.
Uh-huh. And how do I flip it? Just a minute.
So in the lower, you should see this
Oh,
slide
there it
number.
is. Oh, I see,
Yeah.
I see. Wow.
Got it?
I didn't know. I didn't know the progress from the last IETF. I see.
Yeah, and I think the arrow keys on your keyboard will also work,
Uh-huh.
but
Yes.
definitely
Okay.
the buttons.
Oh, yeah, it does. So I put two things in the slide. One is about the hackathon, and another one is for the adding 3 suit format examples in TEEP. So I'm going to start from hackathon, talking about hackathon. We were having a hackathon last week with jointly with suit working group. Yes. Yes, received very early email on Tuesday from Hannes, and yes, we jumped in. And also we had in Japan side in Japanese time we were working on going through our implementation and filing issues on the GitHub and creating pull request. And so for the this is for explaining what is TEEP first. So TEEP, honestly, it's not only about TEEP from the beginning. From when the protocol draft and the architecture draft, it was obvious that it's suit and rats was going to be used in the TEEP, and in the format was changed from ORTRP to TEEP was then it was from JSON. Then it was obvious it's going to be using COSE. So there's many things have to be done in making the TEEP draft finishing, which is which is tough, but which is also challenging and good thing to do, work. Try it. So from last IETF to this IETF, we focused on me and the other people in Japan was, yes, I would like to call their name. Yeah, from AIST is Suzaki-san, from Secom Isobe-san, Takayama-san, and Trajio Kikuchi-san, Nagata-san, and also we joined on the suit working group hackathon too. So Brandon, Hannes, and Dave was working on on his time zone too. And coming back, so we were the main focus was adding suit format in the TEEP draft. Yes, and we would like to finish suit manifest example in the TEEP, so everybody who is going to use TEEP would also understand how to construct the suit manifest inside the TEEP protocol. Then it will be much easier to have the concrete CDDL example with the diagnostic notation example and the binary representation with the commented description and just the binary. And also we started from the last week is started to think about how to support the COSE. Okay, so for the TAM side, we have a TAM proto this as a implementation as a TAM. It's open source on the GitHub. I forgot to write it down the GitHub link here, but it's if you search on the web browser TAM proto TAM, then it will be you could go to it. And what we really did was try the we added about 3 different way of the having suit manifest inside the TEEP message, but we just first we focus on having a trusted component binary, which used to be called trusted application in binary, inside the suit manifest, and that will be inside the TEEP message, a TEEP update message. And also, we from Takayama-san, we started to have libc suit. It's meant to be a library to support, to make it easier who wants to implement a TEEP device or TAM, and and so that was adding this having suit manifest inside libc suit. And also TEEP device, we haven't open source yet, but we trying to working hard to finish the implementation, taking very long time. By the way, after this IETF112, I would like to focus on finishing TEEP device implementation publicly available as soon as possible. I don't know how long it will take, but yes, I will put other work item aside, and I'm going to focus on making TEEP device implementation on GitHub. And what we did was TEEP message format is keep updating, so finished supporting draft 06 of the TEEP message portion, and then adding the example suit manifest format, and which is and also it says integrated payload here, but it means in the same with the on the top line is adding TC binary inside the suit manifest. Suit manifest could have only manifest and it could have binary and separately, but right now we wanted to try having a binary inside the suit manifest and make it workable between the TEEP device and TAM. So okay, and these are the feedback on the draft is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues and pull request. And first one is from Dave, and I think this is many of them are going to be going through with the Dave's talk, but briefly going through is yes. In the TEEP message, yeah, we're going to use EAT token or just the token, and it's we need to decide when to include a token or not. So that's Dave's issues on the GitHub, and also another topic was I was participating in a suit working group on this Monday was yes about cipher suit, and honestly, since we have suit manifest inside the TEEP message, we will just like to use whatever it happens on suit manifest draft for using Kose, exactly the same in the TEEP. Then it will make it much easier for the implementation. We don't have to add any more feature in the library or anything else. We're just reusing it. And but to do that, we just need to align the description between the suit and TEEP, and that's the second one. And the third one is yes, Takayama-san was really working on it. Is he went through reading the suit manifest draft and proposing there's in the description in the suit manifest for the usage of the deleting the binary or firmware or trusted component. Probably using unlink is more preferable. It was our Takayama-san and our understanding. So we made a issue list and pull request, and the fourth is yes, this is something we've been doing from these 3 months was keep updating, finalizing the three-way of the example in the TEEP message of the suit manifest. And the last is, yes, so this was my quick one-line pull request is, since it was a suit example and the suit manifest was using ES256 for the COSE, yes, CWT, then I thought adding in the CDDL description might be better. So it just made a one-line patch. Okay. Yes. So then instead of going to suit manifest example, I would like to explain how the TEEP protocol draft is describing seaboard description. Yes. Honestly, I did suffer a lot when trying to implement the seaboard. So since I suffered a lot, I thought I would put my knowledge into the TEEP protocol draft, so everybody else don't have to go through entire how to implement and how to debug it when the negotiation message going back and forth between the TAM and TEEP device. Probably whoever going to implement the seaboard, yes, just wanted to make it easier for them. So this is the left side is seaboard diagnostic notation, which is derived from reading the CDDL, and the right side, it's in the draft have a binary example, but with the comment on it. So if anything doesn't work with the talking with the other tier of the on the internet, for example, TEEP device and TAM, then you just go. You could see the example and which line might be different in the binary. If it's a JSON, it will be much easier to debug because it's text format. And if you do the Ethereal, it's not Ethereal right now, it's a Wireshark. And if you see the packet dump, then it's pretty much easy. But then if you do the packet dump on the seaboard binary, it's all hexadecimal. So if you scan the hexadecimal and keep going through the right side and left side for about 5 or 10 times, you might started to see on the right side on the packet dump, but started to have an imagination of the left side. I hope so, but yeah, I'm trying to make it slightly easier. So and this is suit manifest is also similar. I mean, yes. We also have a what was the name? Yeah, seaboard diagnostic notation and the binary representation with the comment on it. So if anything, you have something, for example, if the COSE algorithm doesn't match, then if you could see whether it has -16, it's going to be -15 is going to be 2F and hexadecimal. And from the beginning, from D8, 6B, A3, you go through, and if it's you could check if it's correctly, it's TF and parsing correctly in the implementation. Yep. Then I think I'm going to go through the suit manifest examples. Any question for so far? Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. So first example is probably the easiest example. How does it look is when the TEEP update message is sent from TAM to TEEP agent in the TEEP device. It has the suit manifest has the URI pointing to the where the trusted component binary is hosted. So and then the TEEP device will going to in the implementation, they're going to fetch or download the trusted component binary. Right now, we still using .ta for the convenience for the understanding, and inside the tc-uid.ta it doesn't have to be this file name. You could choose any kind of the file name, and since it's in the ARM implementation for the OPTI was using UUID and the file name of the TA, I added the easier to parse it in the mind. If you could use the UUID.ta, and for the example on the Intel SGX, and you could use any kind of the file name. So it's tc-uid.ta, which it's going to be, doesn't have to be using UID, but any file name pointing to the binary. And then the binary has any of the hexadecimal or any binary inside. And this example, good thing is first line is the developer who made the binary of the trusted component is going to be downloaded from their website or HTTPS link. So you will notice the TEEP device have downloaded the binaries, and the TAM do not have to host their the TC binary on the TAM side. So you just provide a suit manifest to the TEEP device, and then the TEEP device will get the binary from a trusted component developer, so it doesn't have to worry about it. And the downside is, trusted component developer have to have a web server or whatever hosting the trusted component binary, and the TEEP device need to download the binary separately after receiving the suit manifest. But it's not that big deal for the second line. And first line, it depends on how much the trusted component developer have the domain name and have the bandwidth for the distribute the binary. Okay, and the second example is also pretty much straightforward. The only difference is inside the suit manifest, instead of have a URI, it has the what do you call it in the CDD? Instead of the URI pointing to other website, you have the TC binary embedded inside the suit manifest as this very simplified written here. Detail is in the draft, but this is the simplified way of the description. So good. So this one is more intuitive. So if the TEEP device requests the TC binary to the TAM server, then the TAM server TEEP update message will contain the suit manifest with the TC binary. So you could receive it in one message. And yes, it's just pretty much the same. Opposite from what I discussed with example one is the trusted component developer do not have to host the binary. Yes. And also it's pretty much the same. What's opposite of what I have just said is the trusted component binary is going to be distributed by TAM. So you just don't have one. You need to trust the TAM, and you can't count the trusted component binary download number or something if you wish. But but the good thing is you don't have to worry about it. And also it's the TAM message from the update message from the TAM to TEEP device will contain the binary. So it's going to tend to be message will be size will be larger than just having a suit manifest. But I really don't think it's a big negative point. I think that's the even downloading a trusted component binary separated from TEEP device from trusted component developer hosted website, it's going to use the same bandwidth. So, and example 3 is the adding the example of the what Brandon have talked at IETF last IETF. When having the personal data for the TC binary already inside the TC TEEP device, then you could distribute in this example is the personal data is the example is having a config.json file. The providing to the dependent TC binary is in this example is the one already have in the TEEP device is tcuid.suit. So if the TC device already have the tcuid exactly the same TC already installed in TEEP device, then could receive the personal data with the suit manifest inside the TEEP update message. And yes. Okay. Yeah, I think I pretty much finished my slide. So yes, summary. Yes, we just started to move on adding the suit support, and we started to consider how to support the Kose and the suit. I mean not TEEP. And yes, we I don't know this suit manifest 3 format should be inside the TEEP draft or it should be in the suit manifest second draft or external draft. Not sure. Probably it's going to be discussion with the Brandon later with the Dave's talk. And yes, I just wanted to explain how the CBOR looks in the TEEP. Yes. And after IETF119, yes, we would like to go on to support, finish the implementation and having the running code, and so we could have the feedback on making the TEEP protocol draft more concrete. Yes, that's it. Questions?
I don't see anybody on the queue.
Want to ask something about this?
Well, there were a couple of people on the chat here feeling your pain.
I see.
So the question, and I think I saw it noted from Dave, the issues that you had listed on the GitHub, I forget the number, was it 161?
160, yes.
That has now been resolved. Oh, there's a set of them, right?
Yes.
Um,
161 is still pending there. So
okay.
so if it's okay to have the three formats in the TEEP draft, it will be, yeah, anybody could Dave or yeah, Ming could merge it, or if it's more appropriate to put it in the suit manifest external draft, which Brandon have split it last week. Yeah, we could move that to to suit manifest draft. I really don't mind which is going, which should go into it, because it's anyway we're going to use the same format.
It does need to get covered. Dave, you have a comment?
Yeah, just first, what I put in the chat was it wasn't merged into draft 07 just because there was merge conflicts as the ID deadline was coming up, and then those were resolved shortly after that. So it could be merged anytime. I think, unless there's comments, right? I think that there is a question about, should stuff be in the TEEP spec or in a separate one? I guess one question that plays into that is how much of these examples suit generic versus TEEP specific, right? So for example, if there was a suit spec that had the styles of examples that just didn't have TEEP stuff in it, is that close enough, or does TEEP? I think right now TEEP has one example in there for each message type where it's like the personalization data examples. I think it's the closest to Akira's third example, right? Not the first or the second one, if I remember right. That's from memory. So Akira, please correct me if I'm wrong. But if suit had more examples in some document, then would TEEP need to cover all the examples or just one of them, which is what we're doing right now? And so I think that's the interesting question that Akira is asking that I would love to hear people's opinions on. So.
Yes. Awesome. Is Brandon here?
Yeah, I don't see Brendan on.
Oh, I thought he was going to jump in, so.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
Or Hank? Hannes? Honestly, these three examples is very very specific with the TEEP suit manifest uses because of the TEEP handling between TAM and TEEP device. But it doesn't mean they have to be in TEEP draft. Could be in suit manifest external draft.
Well, it could be its own separate draft as well, and then we can argue whether that work gets done here in TEEP or it goes back to suit. Hank, you're in the queue.
Yeah, sorry, it was hard for me to press the buttons. I don't know why. Hi, this is Hank. So yeah, in principle, that is not a problem to pull that into the manifest draft or the if it's just the reintegration. There's also merit to have that in a separate draft. I think we are happy to help here. If it is uncomfortable for the TEEP ID to somehow build there around the content, that's not a problem. We can have that in suit. And suit-ish IDs.
Only concern to having the example and the suit manifest external draft is it has the in the example in the format it has the tc-u id.ta, which need the knowledge of how the TA works. Yeah,
that is use case specific expositional text. So we can abstract that, or we can ask guidance from the area director if it's fine to have a specific name here. I think that's just a legwork problem.
Or having the three example in TEEP draft, but have the a bunch of the other example in suit manifest as it is right now is also fine.
Yeah, but then so maybe other people have an opinion on this, but I think I like to see the examples in one place, to be honest.
Nice. Yeah.
So yeah.
So Hank, you're kind of saying you prefer it in the suit.
Preference is not my, so if it's too clunky to have them in TEEP, I think suit is happy to help. I would call it like that. So I don't have a preference. I have the desire to help.
Okay. So I see Brendan.
Yeah.
Brendan is on, and
I summoned him maybe.
that of course he prefers it in the TEEP document.
Okay. I see. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. So we can continue that discussion, I guess, on the mail list.
Could I just
as needed.
briefly say why? Sorry for jumping the queue there. Essentially, the concern I've got is that with the refactoring that's been done in suit, so that there are multiple documents with multiple different sets of pieces of the original suit manifest. Now, suit's already going to have examples in more than one place. And because of that, I think it would be really sort of incongruous to have TEEP examples in the core of the suit document when some of suit's examples aren't in the core document.
I see. Yeah. And also, if the suit manifest format is in the TEEP draft, we could say how to adopt the suit manifest in a future protocol other than TEEP. If it might give a little bit of guidance. Yes. Okay.
So sorry, I had a skipping in the audio exactly when Brendan said the essential sentence. Brendan, could you please repeat that?
Sir, sure. The point is that suit has examples spread over multiple documents right now. So I'm happy to put examples in suit where they're appropriate. But the question is, if there isn't an appropriate document in suit for a TEEP example to land in, I think it's just a little bit incongruous to shoehorn one into a document where it's not appropriate. So it makes sense to me to put, if TEEP is a profile of suit, then it should have its own examples for suit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, but that would remain. So the profiling aspect of TEEP, would that be its own document then? It isn't the protocol or architecture. So where would that go in TEEP then?
Well,
so Ben,
maybe that was a big if.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I assumed suit is the more likely lane, but I'm just guessing now. So maybe other TEEP authors have a better, or editors have a better opinion.
So Ben is listing another issue on the chat, that if we have a lot of examples, that there may be a desire to have them all in one place. And so, okay, I don't think we're going to resolve this here. Go ahead, Ben, since you're our AD.
Yeah, I think my note in the Jabber may have been based on a flawed assumption. So I think Dave is clarifying that, the idea is to have a single document that is just examples, and the question is whether to do that in the TEEP or the suit working groups. And I think either of those are fine, and I agree with you that we're probably not going to get a clear resolution in the meeting right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we'll continue forward then. Thank you, Akira.
Yes, thank you. How do I stop the sharing slide? Oh, there it is.
Well, I can just revoke it as well. Okay, so up next we have Dave with the main protocol. Spec, Dave, do you want me to share slides or you want to share them?
You can share them, but I've been in queue for Akira's document. Brendan was actually not present in the meeting at the time that Akira's question was first worded, so I wanted to clarify one nuance of the question, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead. I somehow didn't see.
And we don't have to answer it right now, but I want Brendan to fully understand the question. So if this is moved to the list, then he can appropriately weigh in. The examples that Akira walked through, the part of the question that we would love you to weigh in on, not necessarily at the mic here, but at some point, right, is the examples of things like what does it look like when you take the actual binary embedded into the suit manifest? What does it look like when you have a URI that points to it hosted off the thing? Are those things that are inherently TEEP-specific concepts, or are those things that are suit generic? And so that's the examples he's going through, is those different variations. And so that's why the question is it really something in a TEEP profile, or are these just examples of generic suit things that should, or maybe already are, in a document in the suit working group? And so if you can do a scan through of Akira's examples and say, these things are actually just illustrating suit generic concepts versus, no, this one is actually a TEEP-specific concept, that would be very valuable, Brendan. So, okay. All right, so let's move on to the protocol slides here. Oh, I gotta leave the queue and leave my audio on. Okay, hopefully you can all still see and hear me. All right, we're going to be talking about draft 7 of the TEEP protocol. Next slide. All right, so since 111, there was a long backlog of old issues that we've been slowly working through in TEEP working group meetings. And we've now got to the point that almost all the old issues have now been resolved, and we're only talking about new issues. And so I'm going to clear the backlog today in the discussions here, and then go on to the new ones file. But there really aren't any old ones. Previously, we kind of picked the most important ones to talk about in the working group meeting, and we've now kind of cleared that backlog. And so, and most of the spec, right, has now been implemented by at least one implementation, right? You heard Akira mention the last pieces that were kind of still in progress, right? Integration of other things. But we think we've fleshed out all of the areas of the spec that there might be an issue until we actually implement things. But there's no section of the spec that somebody hasn't at least started on. So go ahead and go on to the next slide. All right, so here are some of the ones that we previously discussed at IETF 111, and I'm not going to go through each of these on slides. This is just a list of things that we covered last IETF meeting, and we had proposed resolutions, and those have now been incorporated into draft 7. And so we added the error code for no freshness mechanism in common. You can read through the rest of those, but all of those, we believe we've just put in the results from what was in the minutes from last IETF meeting. Okay, go on to the next slide. There are things that people want to stop and ask about, but the point is, all of these are things that we spent some time discussing last time. So these are the ones that were continued. This one we spent quite a bit of time on. And so this was like all the discussion of OCSP and capability discovery that was kind of the main focus of last meeting. And so we've done the results there, right? We've removed all references to OCSP, right? We said you just have to have a update mechanism to update your trust anchors, and that's how you do revocation. And so all the different points that were raised during the meeting, we believe we've incorporated those back into the spec. And so I'm not going to show you the text because my belief is it just matches what we said. And we would invite you to inspect the text yourself just to verify that if you had an important point you wanted to be in there, make sure it's in there. But we believe we've collected everything from last IETF meeting. So I wanted to go on and discuss new issues. And so unless there's a question on those, then I'd like to go on. But let me pause for a second. There's nobody in the queue, right? Okay, let's go ahead and go on unless there's questions on any of those. So, all right. So now I'm going to walk through other ones that were kind of in the backlog. And so this is one that was one of the older ones that's finally been merged. And so this one I think was originally one of the hackathon filed issues from maybe 2 or 3 IETFs ago, and the text finally got merged. So after various edits and rebases and merge conflict resolutions. And so remember, tokens here is the name for the nonce-like thing that appears in that can appear in a TEEP request that's echoed back in the TEEP response if the TAM needs to match requests and responses. And so depending on the freshness mechanism in use and so on, the token is optional depending on use case. It's up to the TAM. And so when you are using a token, sometimes known as a nonce, right? It now has actual requirements around there. Must be random, different per request. Only one response is allowed per token. You can't use it for other purposes other than this particular purpose in TEEP. And when you issue a nonce in a request, there should be some expiration such that you can't come back 3 months later or something, right? Just the expectation is you don't keep state around forever, right? So that's the kind of the guidance that's in there right now. So that one is now merged. Next. So this one, now I'm getting into the one that I filed during this hackathon, right? This one is ambiguity in the spec. That, in my opinion, there's a straightforward way to address this, but here's my presentation about it. The update message allows the token field and says it's optional, but it actually doesn't have any text that says when to include it, right? And so you could treat that as you could read that as a couple different ways. So the responses, right, a success message or an error message you send back when processing an update message does say that you have to echo back the token if it's present in the update. And the update can include a suit report. And if the suit report has a nonce, then I should say if the update has a token, then the suit report, if present, must have the suit report nonce in it. Okay. And so and I see Russ, you're in the queue, but let me finish the slide here and then I'll go to you, Russ. The proposal that I have is just to clarify the ambiguity, is to explicitly say that it's up to the TAM implementation. So in other words, you're allowed to have a token in a delete message or an update message or a query request message. It's not a requirement that you use, all three or none of the three. You can pick and choose however you want. In other words, we don't explicitly say that, but the proposal is just say the TAM gets to decide when a token is appropriate. So it can do it sometimes, not other times, or whatever. Right? That's my proposal, because that's one way to read the wording right now. And so my opinion is that's the least change from what the text says right now and leaves the most freedom for people to innovate and optimize for their implementation. And then separately, besides explicitly saying that, to say that the TEEP agent must ensure that the suit report nonce is present if the update contains a nonce. And so that's already implied, okay, but it's not explicitly stated, so we can make that be more explicit. So Russ, do you have an opinion on this one? Go ahead.
No, I have an opinion on the last one.
Okay.
I'm sorry it took me longer to read your list than you spent on the slide.
Okay,
So,
sure. Go back, Nancy.
Yeah. My concern is that tokens must be different per request. I hope you don't mean that people have to keep track of every token they ever used. What you mean is that the probability of reuse is small.
I think the intent, and so I think the actual wording was authored by one of our Japanese colleagues, but I believe that the intent is that it must be different per outstanding request. And so, and there's different ways of doing that. And so there are ways to not have to retain state. So you could have a pseudo-random sequence.
Right. That's
so
my point.
like that.
Is that the probability of the same value being picked is so small that you don't have to keep track.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we can look for some better wording there.
So that's my concern is some wordsmithing.
Okay, good point. Make sure that appears in the notes and we'll pick that up. Thank you. All right, let's go on, Nancy. Unless there's anybody in the queue getting up for this one, unless there's any alternate proposals, then we'll go forward with this proposal unless somebody has a better idea. So if I see nobody at the queue, we'll assume that would be okay. All right, so the next whole section of the agenda, and since the RATS working group is up right after TEEP today, I prioritized the EAT stuff in the agenda to make sure that we have time to go through this as opposed to the suit stuff, which does not have a thing right after this. And so I wanted to have any input necessary for us to go into the RATS working group after TEEP. So if we were to run out of time, I would rather make sure we cover all the EAT stuff and not cover all the other stuff that I have, or cover less the other stuff that I have. So I've got EAT, then suit, then optimizations in that order. So here's the EAT stuff. So there's been a bunch of threads about this one, started off as the RATS meeting on Monday. And so let me just summarize the discussion I've seen so far. If there was anything overnight, I am not up to speed, but I'm up to speed as of yesterday, so yesterday afternoon. All right, so there were two issues related to referencing of EAT. One of those is already merged, one of those is open to track the remaining things. And so on the left is the sets of requirements, and I'll go through the ones for the second row there in more details in the later slides, but this is the one that summarizes all the other ones. So there's a set of requirements from the architecture draft. okay, which is, as Nancy said, is already in the ISG. So we've already got, working group consensus on the left column, although I have a question about that later, as we'll see. The middle column is what draft 07 says right now, okay? And so there are 1, 2, 3 of those requirements that draft 07 points to the core EAT spec as meeting those requirements, and there are 5 of those that it points to an individual submission Hinks document as meeting the other 5 in the hopes that those would be merged into the EAT spec, right? That was the status as when draft 07 was posted, okay? On the far right side is the current proposal for the next draft, other than the yellow one is subject to discussion here. And so we'll talk about that in there's a couple of variations of how that might be done or not done or whatever. So the other ones that are currently pointing to burk holes, the proposal is to point those to the latest EAT spec because there's been some rewordings of some existing things in some cases, and there's been some new claims added in other cases, okay? So the belief now is that the vendor of the device can be specified using an OEM ID claim. And remember that EAT has different claim sets. You're gonna have a claim set for each component, right? Your overall evidence can have multiple claim sets, one for each layer or one for each component or whatever. And so OEM ID can appear multiple times, one for each component, right? So the vendor of the device, if you're talking about a device claim set, then OEM ID would be the vendor of the device. Similarly, the device unique identifier, EUID, could be used as the unique identifier in a claim set about properties of the device, okay? As opposed to the properties of, the firmware or the TEEP-TA or whatever else. So EUID, we believe, could be used for that one. And then new in the latest EAT spec, they added the software identifiers. Previously it talked about COSWIDs, but it didn't actually have any formal text in there that was implementable, and now it does, right? And so now in the COSWID section, the software name and software version can be used to meet what the architecture document uses words for firmware type and firmware version, right? It uniquely identifies what's the firmware that's actually on there. And so the belief is that the EAT 11 spec, draft 11 of EAT, actually meets all but one of the requirements of the that's talked about in the TEEP spec right now, the TEEP architecture document right now, and that's class of device. And so that's what all the remaining discussion is about, is that one remaining thing. And I see Brendan in queue. So if you're going to, anything other than class of the device is in scope for this slide. So feel free to ask questions, anything else. So.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I want to make sure is that we're not constructing a situation where devices are required to convert between a variety of different identifiers. This is a moment where we need to be really careful about how we sync up between a bunch of drafts that are in flight at the moment. I'm concerned, and to be honest with you, I have not looked through this to the extent where I can tell whether OEM ID, EUID, and the current UUIDs specified in the suit draft are compatible or not. I just want to ensure that we're not forcing constrained nodes to convert between a variety of different identifiers for the ease of consumption of large-scale systems, because I think that would be a mistake.
So I think the one that you should look at and form your own opinion, I think, is EUID, which is specified in EAT as being twice as long as a UUID. And so I think the other ones you'd probably be happy enough with, but that one I would draw your attention to and form an opinion. So it's like a UUID in the same sense of properties, other than the length is twice as long.
I think that device identifiers are probably the ID that suit cares about the least. So I suspect I'm not too worried about that one. Okay.
All right, but yeah, those would be feedback, I think, for the RATS working group, which I would invite you to the working group session following this one. So, all right, unless there's any other comments on any of the other ones, then all the rest of these things are about the class of device discussion, which has been an active discussion this week. Thank you to all of those who have weighed in on it, and thank you for coming to this session if you wouldn't normally be in TEEP. So next slide, please. Okay, so let's do some history here and talk about some background for class of device, because there were some questions for anybody coming from, say, the RATS working group that wouldn't normally be here in TEEP as to what this requirement is and what TEEP's use is. So the first use of this in TEEP came from the legacy OTRP draft, which we don't use anymore. But if you're looking back at the history, you can see, and I think Jeremy had posted on the combined thread, the TEEP suit thread, about what OTRP does. And so you see in the OTRP protocol, which is now part of global platform specifications, it does have this notion of type of firmware, right, which I mentioned in the previous slide that the Coswood can cover that one, and the type of TEE included in a device, right? And so that's one example wording, and OTRP does this. So next slide, but that's not our spec anymore. So it's just that was a predecessor to what TEEP architecture has. Okay, so a couple places in the TEEP architecture document that actually specify the requirement that we're talking about now. Okay, one is here talking about device identifying information. Okay, attestation information may need to uniquely identify a device to the TAM. Right, that's more like the EUID case. Right, it allows the TAM to provide services to the device, such as managing installed TAs, providing subscriptions to services, locating device-specific keying material to communicate with and authenticate the device. Or authenticate device. In some cases, it may be sufficient to identify only the class of device, right? If you're managing, 10,000 things, you have the same policy for all 10,000 of them, not on a device-by-device basis for scalability, right? And so what's the class of the device, right? Not the serial number, but what's the model number or some other class or category that applies to the whole set of things, not on a per serial number basis, where EUID is like a serial number, okay? Next slide. The other part of the requirement, just to verify, is in the TEE identifying information, and this is the type of TEE that generated this attestation must be identified, right? And includes, version information for hardware, firmware, software, and so on. Those other bullets or the other rows in that table, right? TE manufacturer information for the TEE, right? That's like OEM ID for the TEE claim set, right? Is required in order to disambiguate the same TEE created by different manufacturers. And so, as an example, right, in the ARM ecosystem, right, you have say a trust zone TEE, but the actual chip manufacturers vary. It's anybody that licenses the ARM design, right? So you can imagine a trust zone with multiple OEM IDs, but it's the same TE type, which is trust zone, right? So again, there's a class of device there. In this example, I think if I'm interpreting, if I understand the ARM ecosystem right, this is an example where there might be a TE type that would span multiple OEM IDs, and that's an important concept to keep track of when I get to that question in another slide here. So, all right. So hopefully somebody will correct me if I have something wrong, but this is the text that's already passed working group last call and has passed on to the ISG. So we already have consensus on this text. And now it's just, we have to talk about how we can effectively meet these requirements. So go ahead and go on to the next slide, Nancy. Okay. As meeting that claim. And so this is what we want to replace with a working group document. Whether this document gets adopted as a working group document, but this is really the only thing left that TEEP depends on is this one section here. If we make those other changes that I mentioned, because the EAT spec has now incorporated other things. So there's a class.
Yeah, this is not good.
No, just checking. Am I back now?
Yeah,
You are back.
Okay,
Woo,
I got a notice from ETECO that I was having glitches, so I knew about it. So as long as I'm back now, I'm saying, so this one, it was a proposal that uses a UUID to meet the type claims about the type of device, type of TEE. This one says you could use a UUID for those two purposes, and that's what the TEEP spec references right now. And so whether a UUID is appropriate or not is an upcoming question, but that's one that we said that is referenced in the last TEEP spec. So that's one proposal. Next slide. I don't see the slide on my screen. Can you guys still see the slide on the screen? Okay, here we go. It just came up.
We see the EPR 139 slide.
Yep, it was just delayed. It came up for me. All right, so Lawrence opened a pull request on Monday or Tuesday against the EAT spec saying, would this meet the requirement? Okay, and that's what has then generated lots of discussions. So in this example, right, it's a byte blob, okay, as opposed to a UUID, okay? And you can see the various descriptions and stuff there, right, set by the hardware OEM vendor. Again, wording is flexible. This is just a pull request, right? There's no global schema format for this claim. And so it's still opaque, just like a UID is, right? There's no format for the claim. It's an opaque blob that you can use, but there's no structure in it, okay? So again, that's a pull request as another proposal. Next slide. Okay, so here's the set of questions for discussion here. And various individuals have weighed in on the list on these questions already, but I wanted to summarize what the questions were that people have weighed in on and see if we can get any way forward or direction here so we know whether this is going to be a TEEP profile thing or an EAT general thing. Okay, so the first one, and these are all interrelated questions here, so feel free to get in the mic in any one of these 4 questions here, because there are interrelationships between these. Okay, and I know a number of people have posted their comments to the list, but not everybody here has read everybody's is probably up on that thread, and we want to get some consensus direction out of the working group here if possible. So the first one is this notion of a hardware class identifier, right? Is this a notion that is specific to TEEP, or is this a generally applicable notion? Okay, that's the first question. Is the value of the class identifier, is that something that's globally unique, like a UID is? Is it something that's up to the vendor, right? Because, you know, if it's a byte blob or whatever, could 2 different vendors use the same value, right? And the meaning of it is different? Or is it up to the profile where 2 different vendors can use the same value and the meaning of it is the same because it's more like a identifier of trust zone regardless of what the vendor is, right? Is it opaque, or is there any structure to it? You can see the 2 proposals that I mentioned are opaque. If, heaven forbid, somebody used a text string, somebody might assume some structure, or even if it's a byte blob, somebody might put some structure in there where you would not do that with a UID. Right now, both the proposals are opaque from my understanding. And then finally, is the value a UUID, as in Hank's original proposal, or a byte blob, like it is in Lawrence's one, or as was brought up on the email thread, a text string, which was mentioned as what OTRP does, and Brendan said, please no. Or is it an OID, or is it a URL? And so that's kind of all the things people are weighing on the long thread. So I see Brendan in queue, so you get to go first.
So this might actually back up slightly to OEM ID as well, just as a warning. But I think it's important to consider in this that class identifiers are not unique for a device. One device could have many class identifiers. And the reason this is really important is because it allows someone to distinguish between the various different kinds of configuration that they care about. So as you mentioned, you could easily have a class identifier for a TEE, but you might also want to have a class identifier for all the TEEs of a particular kind that also have access to a specific trusted peripheral, like maybe a particular version of a GPU, if you happen to be building DRM. Or maybe you care about access to a specific kind of crypto accelerator, in which case you definitely need a class identifier for that. And that's probably actually going to have a different OEM ID and a different class ID than the TEE itself. So what you actually care about in these situations is aggregations of multiple OEM and class ID pairs. And so, I mean, there's a couple of different ways that you can handle this. You can have a structured class identifier in some kind of enormous tree, or you can have a list of pairs, which is possibly easier to parse and handle. There's a lot of different options here. And I think it's important that we consider that there are a lot of different use cases here for different kinds of ways of identifying exactly what a class means to you and your TA.
I will mention out of the 2 possibilities you mentioned, there's a third possibility, I think, which is the one that's most natural in EAT, which is multiple claim sets. So you have, just like you could have multiple claim sets, one for each layer, you could have multiple claim sets, one for each component in a composite device. you could have multiple claim sets for other purposes. So if you need to have different, you said, lists of, pairs of them, you could put those in different claim sets and use the submod relationship to indicate the relationship. That's probably the one that's the most natural way, because then it's not just this pair. You could have any set of claims that could be varied together, right? You could have, whether it's a timestamp or anything else that kind of goes along with that. So multiple claim sets is the most natural way to do that. But I see other people in queue, so.
I mean, the thing on that is that one particular thing can have multiple claim sets. You could have a particular TEE, and that TEE could have a particular type of OS and so on and so on.
So what's interesting, I guess I didn't give you the background here, but for anybody that's not familiar with the TEEP format, there's when I say up to the profile here in the second bullet, there's a separate claim that's the profile. Okay, and so there's with the value of being what that profile would be, and so you can imagine, profile value equals TEEP, right? And so the same component, in theory, could also have multiple profiles, which would be multiple claim sets for the same component, just because that component happens to be wearing two hats and have two profiles. That is in theory possible too. I don't think that example is in there, but I don't think there's anything that would preclude it. So, okay, Hank.
Yeah, hi Dave. So my next words I have to phrase very carefully. I have to treat very carefully, because none of my co-authors are here. and they are all the hardware vendors and the TE builders and the attestation environment creators. So, and this is already hinting this is coming from RATS. And in RATS, the thing I like Brandon's comment on, you can have multiple ways to express these, let's call them multi-OEM, multi-part things, that you have multiple classes combined. And that is especially true in composite devices and composite device attestation in RATS, where you also have the layered attestation maybe on top of that. So you have also the dependencies, which environment reports on which environment, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we are very careful and very complex in describing that from the supply chain side. And we decided on maps that have classes, instances, and groups, which are arbitrary subsets of these. Can be identified with specific maps that can have class IDs, vendor strings, model strings, layer identifiers, and other indices of hardwares. For example, there's the entity MIP that can help you. So there's a lot of things that really can help you if you support all of these. And then I think in the GitHub thread about this, Thomas just provided a very small subset that is the tagged OID, the tagged UUID, and the tagged integer, which is an interesting choice, but coming from one of the vendors who just used numbers there. And that is a TE component, not a complete TE identifier. So, and that's not including instances and groups and such. So I think looking at that corresponding work in RATS tentatively, that is COREM, might yield a lot of interesting choices here. And also, I think, represents the complexity of how to represent hierarchies of composite class things to have the which again would be can be classes by their own then. How complex it is. So yeah, OID, URL, all that is possible actually. And I don't know if this complexity is required for ETF. So that's my take home here. I think maybe you don't need all of that. But maybe looking at this and having a subset of what is required could help.
So again, for other people in the queue here, the thing that is the most useful is any comments on the top two. Comments on the bottom one is probably the least important, because that's important only once you've agreed on the answers to the top ones. And so is it TEEP specific or general? Is it profile specific, vendor specific, or globally unique? And I understand Brendan's point is maybe the answer is multiple if you have multiple purposes, who knows? But that's the one I would most likely to get consensus on, so we can get direction to EAT versus RATS. TEEP versus RATS. I think a number of the RATS community have argued that it should be up to the profile and could be done in TEEP. I think previously TEEP assumed that it would be global and be done in RATS, but that was before this thread, and so that's why I wanted to spend some time on this. So Eric, you're up next.
Sure. Hi, Eric Voigt coming over from RATS. I definitely think it should be global. I do think there are parallels with profile. Certainly things like TPM 1.2 and 2.0 are things that are useful to standardize the behavior of effectively what an API and a behavior is. So the idea of having a union of behaviors sort of supportable here is something that is interesting. On the text discussion, as it should be a string, I don't think we want to have anything like that, but I do think that there are values in having standardized options which people have agreed on API type, as well as having some vendor extensibility for new types that are out there.
Okay. Hannes, and then I'll give an example. If somebody else doesn't, I'll give an example or two that came up on the list where I think Lawrence gave one example of things that might be up to the vendor or up to the profile, and see what people think. But Hannes, you're in queue. Go ahead.
Hey, I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
I'm trying to write the meeting minutes, and it was difficult to sort of associate the responses of the commenters to the questions. Maybe you could maybe you could summarize what did you hear? Like, what did you get out of the comments so far, so I can capture it in the meeting minutes for the benefit of others who are not on the call.
I'm with you, so that's why I was going to ask some more specific questions, but I had a hard time associating comments with specific questions too. Other than I think Brendan's, where Brendan's point was there might be multiple types of class identifier. So that one was pretty clear. Henk is back in queue, so I think he's going to clarify his comments to the mic. So go ahead, Henk.
Yeah, apparently, as I understood afterwards, I replied to the least interesting one. It's the last question. So there's that, and also it is a lot of things, and it is a complex hierarchy tree.
Okay. All right. So I'll mention the two examples. Oh, I see Eric, you're back in queue. If you want to clarify yours, go ahead.
One other, and the bullet 2, value globally unique, but vendor extensible. And there are ways of doing that. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Eric's comment is specifically on the second one. Okay. To support both, which I gather is something, there's many address spaces, there's many numbering spaces in IANA that do that, right? That have a vendor extensible section reserved, whether we're talking about numbers or strings or any other format, there's ways to do that. So, examples that have come up on the list is things that are vendor specific, and I think Lawrence gave an example where his example was a generic example that says, you know, Tesla, and so his was in the argument as to why a byte string is better than UUID because it's more compact and accessible for constrained devices, because your class identifiers could be very short, much less than, say, 16 bytes. Such as, you know, Tesla Model S, 3, X, or Y would be examples of, say, 1 byte things that are vendor specific, right? You just translate that into TE type or device type or whatever instead of Tesla. But your point is you could have, say, 1 byte identifiers that is really within the context of an OEM ID. The pairing of that plus, you know, a very small number of bytes is unique class identifier that's a vendor specific one. So that was one example that came up on the list. The example that I gave earlier is something that might be not vendor specific, but up to a profile, which is if you had a TEE type that could span multiple vendors, multiple OEMs. And so I mentioned trust zone, but you could imagine the same thing could be true for RISC-V TEs or whatever. If there's multiple vendors that have the same TEE type and you have TAs meant for that TEE type, regardless of which chip manufacturer built the chip, right? Just like in TPMs, right? Same spec, but many different TPM manufacturers, right? And so there was examples of why a class identifier might be profile specific, why it might be vendor specific, and of course UUIDs are just globally unique. And so if you think about, do we need a registry of things that are well known, okay, or not? Because if it's up to the vendor, you don't need a registry, right? If you have up to the profile, you need a registry, right? Or whether so we would need in the TEEP profile if we have the class identifier values that are specific to TEEP, right? If TEEP says here's a space you could register, you want trust zone, here's the IANA registry to register a value for trust zone that's vendor agnostic. And so what do people, because what we want to know is this something that needs to be done purely in TEEP, and there's no requirement on rats, and rats can just have to eat go forward without talking about this and say that's part of a TEEP profile, and we can add claims in there. Okay, rats would be fine with that, right? That's something we've talked about in TEEP, hence this discussion. Or if we say, no, there's really nothing that's TEEP specific here. This is all generalizable, and it should really be in the EAT spec, or at least in the rats working group. And so that's the most important. That's the top bullet here. That's the most important one, because in the next meeting, right, rats is going to try to decide, should we start working group last call on EAT and kind of ignore this, or have the discussion go on in parallel, or just leave it to TEEP, right? That's what we want the feedback to rats to be for the next meeting. So. Now that I've clarified that and given some examples, anybody else have opinions on this? Because otherwise I'm going to summarize maybe a straw man from what I've heard so far, just to help Hannes, okay? I think if I were to put out a straw man so far, based on list discussion so far, the path of least resistance might be to say that, at least for now, it's specific to TEEP and a TEEP profile. But with a vendor extensible space. So to Eric's point, okay, in which case we TEEP would have to define a new claim. We would have to define a new, say, IANA registry for the values and a way for vendors to extend them. And then the bottom bullet becomes a TEEP question and not a RATS question, okay? But that seems to be the path of least resistance based on the thread so far. But since this is a different direction from what TEEP has said so far, this is our chance to either change our minds or to stick the course or whatever. So, but I think that's what when I saw the last responses from Giri and Lawrence, I think that was their conclusion, that they did not see any consensus that there was some generally applicable thing. But if you think that there is, please come to the mic and say so, because that's probably the default path that rats would advise us on, if I'm reading the thread correctly. Nancy, you're also a co-chair of rats. Anything else you want to add that would help the rats versus TEEP discussion?
No, I think you're stating all of the issues, and frankly, I'm trying to make sense of the email thread as well. I'm trying to figure out how we get consensus.
Okay, if I don't hear everybody come to mic, then I'm going to say that we don't have any other more strict guidance to rats other than, sure, we'll deal with it in TEEP. If somebody else wants to argue that it's general, feel free, but otherwise, because kind of the worst case danger would just be, we define something that's TEEP specific, it turns out to be general, and now we've got two claims that do the same thing in the future, right? That would be the risk, and maybe that will never happen, but all right, Brendan?
Okay, I'll take them in order. It looks to me like it's a general problem. Whether or not this is a general solution, I don't know, but there's definitely a general problem. You can see that because Suit has identified the problem as well, so it's definitely not TEEP specific.
Very useful, thank you.
I think that class identifiers should be scoped by vendor or profile. I don't think they need to be globally unique because in general, you can't find something that has a class that's relevant for security or compatibility that doesn't come with either a vendor or a profile. If you can come up with a counterexample, then I'll step back from that one. But I don't think that they can ever be globally unique. I plead with you to please make sure that it's opaque and to enforce somehow that it's opaque. And my preference is a UUID because you can turn anything into a UUID by using the type 5 UUID, which just hashes it and throws away a bunch of the bits. So that's my preference because it ends up being enforceably opaque because the content actually just doesn't mean anything other than allow you to match it to something you already know.
Thank you. I think that was a very useful comment, and thank you for explaining the rationale. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm just going to repeat back what I heard because I think I agree with everything that you said. The only one that's, I think, debatable is the last one, but I tend to agree with you on it. And so I think the proposal is that the claim ID, right, meaning the CBOR integer number or label or whatever, is actually general. The values of it are either vendor specific or up to the profile. So in other words, the EAT spec could say, here is the well-known claim, but the values of it need to be specified as one of the requirements for a profile is to, cover how the values are done, but there's still a way to do it for vendors and a way for the profile to find well-known values. I'm repeating back what I think your proposal is, right? And then out of the values, right, regardless of whether it's done by the vendor or the profile, then it must be opaque, okay? And you like UUID specifically because it guarantees that it's opaque. Well, and the other reasons too, even if it's a little bit longer, if you try to byte string or whatever, the danger is somebody would try to put structure in there and you wouldn't like that. And so UUID actually enforces the opaqueness requirement. Did I get all that right?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for the technical rationales for all of those. That was very useful. Anyone else have an opinion? Because otherwise, I'm gonna. Since I like Brendan's summary there, I'd like to see, are there any objections to that as the TEEP recommendation as we go into the RATS working group next? That the request for RATS would be, hey, can you define a claim, but leave it up to the vendor and the profile to define the values that go with the claim.
I want to make sure we're capturing it in the notes well as well.
Yeah. I mean, like OEM ID, right? The OEM ID, the RATS working group is not going to actually define the values of OEM ID, right? It's going to define like a registry or something, or a way, or it does, right? It defines a way for you to figure out what goes in there, right? Remember if it's your one of the other ID numbering spaces already exists. But the point is the EAT spec doesn't enumerate the values, right? It says here's how to put stuff in there. And this is this case where it could say the profile needs to do that, IANA needs to do that, whatever. So, all right, Hank.
So yeah, I think that TEEP requires this opaqueness and everything they can transform to a type 5 UUID on the evidence side or attestation result side of things, which is fine. And I think Brandon said the critical words because you know that. So on the other hand, you have to know that. That is something where a UUID might not be sufficient, but that's not a TEEP problem, I think. So I would agree with Brandon. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any objections to saying that my summary of what Brendan said is the consensus of those in the room? I'm not saying it is yet. I'm saying, okay, would that be the consensus of the room? If you don't think that that is the consensus, you have a technical argument against that, then please come to the mic. We're trying to form a consensus. So that is a proposed consensus. Do people like that or not? I don't know if you want to do a call of hands on this one, or just since nobody's coming to the mic, if we just say that that seems to be the sense of the room right now. So up to you, Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, I could take a poll, or why don't I do it the reverse? If there are any objections, okay. But now I have to capture what we're doing consensus for.
I'm going to try to type something into chat here. Each should do a claim, but leave values to be defined by vendors and profiles. Okay, that's the first piece. Okay.
Well, each should
and I think that's separate from the actual format. You can split it into two of them. Okay, and then number two. Okay. Value should be a UUID to guarantee uniqueness. Now, previously, what TEEP had said is the TEEP working group as a whole does not actually care which format it is, only that we care that it's unique, and we would leave it to RATS to decide that. And so, okay, there we go.
I don't know that I stated it well, but
it's close enough.
All right, I think we have.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give it another minute because we've got 48 participants, but only 13 have voted.
And then I'm going to propose that that's really the only one that you have to call on, because my opinion is based on, if the opinion of that one is that the yes is the consensus, then the actual discussion of the other ones is not a TEEP thing. It's a RATS thing on the bottom bullet here. The only thing that might be worth doing it is, do we agree that the value needs to be opaque, right? As opposed to the value needs to be a UUID or whatever, which that should be up to how they meet the requirement. That's just our preferences right now, and that's a RATS working group discussion. But does the value need to be opaque would be a fair way to ask the question.
Okay. Well, I agree with you that first we need to agree that each should do the claim, not us. Yeah. Okay, so we only have one no vote. So I think we have a good consensus here because we've got 16 positive votes. Okay. So I'm going to call it, and I think we have guidance.
So do you want to ask the other question, or just leave that to the RATS working group and say to take the rest of the discussion into RATS?
Well, let me just ask this. The second one is the value should be a
opaque.
I'm just going to say, should the value be opaque? Okay.
Right, where a UUID is opaque, a white blob may or may not be opaque, but we're not asking the question about the format, about is opaqueness an actual requirement from TEEP?
Okay, so I've started a new poll, whether the value should be opaque.
That's looking pretty strong consensus there.
Yeah, I'm going to give it another minute, though. This may actually help us move forward on the EAT draft, too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to give it 10 more seconds. Okay, I think we've kind of stabilized. So
okay,
that one you have strong consensus on. So I think we're good to go. Okay,
let's go on to the next slide then. Thank you all. This has been a very useful discussion to me. So, but before we leave the EAT section,
Dave, I recorded for the first question consensus. For the second question on value should be opaque, strong consensus. And I don't think you did a poll on the UUID itself, right? Or did I miss that?
No, I did not.
Correct. I'm saying, based on the results of the other two, this one is a RATS discussion that TEEP really doesn't care. And that it should be RATS that calls that question, not TEEP.
Yeah. Thank you for capturing that, Hannes.
Yeah. Right. Next slide, Nancy. Okay. So trying to finish out the EAT stuff. The EAT document, section 7, covers requirements for an EAT profile. There's this long list of requirements there. Some of those requirements are covered in the TEEP document right now, like use of JSON, CBOR, or both, where we say it's only CBOR. Like the second one from the bottom, CBOR tags. We previously, last IETF, had discussion that we're not going to use a CBOR tag. It's just raw because you always know that it's they always know that it's an EAT. And so on, but not all of them. So next slide, please. You can see there's that long list of requirements. It says if you're going to define an EAT profile, you got to cover all those. So that's what the new document says. Okay. So today, not all of those are covered in the TEEP protocol spec, but many of those are. So, right, so there's two ways to resolve this issue. One is we just cover the missing ones by putting those in the TEEP protocol spec. Another possibility is to say we could separate all the EAT profile stuff and put it into the same spec. Okay. Because it's already in the TEEP protocol, the pieces of it that are answered right now, the default answer is the same spec, but I just wanted to verify, is there anybody that has an argument as to why that should be separated out into a separate spec? Things that could have been reasons for B that do not currently apply is if you had multiple protocols that were all going to be using the same EAT profile, but that's currently not the case. It would be a separate spec if, say, there was a reason to implement the EAT protocol without the EAT protocol, or without the EAT profile. That's not the case. Or if there was a reason to say we need the TEEP protocol spec to go to RFC while we're still working on it because it's optional. That's also not the case. So all the reasons I can think of for B don't apply. And so right now the proposal is we're going to address this by putting all the other requirements there into the actual TEEP protocol spec, unless there's any objections. Okay. If there's nobody that comes to the mic, we can go on to the next slide. Because that will be what's not in draft 07 that would be in draft 08 as we got to go through the rest of that list.
Okay. You've got Ira agreeing with you on the chat.
All right, thank you.
So,
next.
yep.
Okay, now we're out of the EAT section. Now we are into, so thanks to those who, oh, interesting. This one is actually out of order. I meant to go to the suit ones next, but that's okay. I'll still cover this. I meant to cover, let's see, we got half hour left. Let's skip this one. We'll come back to it. I want to get to the suit discussions.
Yeah, you have exactly 30 minutes left.
Or a little bit less because you want to save the last, but I'll go as long as you can. But let's skip this one. I want to get to the suit ones because if we don't get to the optimization ones, that's fine. This is in the optimization category.
There you go.
Yeah, this is what we're on here. Okay.
I'm fine giving you the time, Dave. I mean,
okay.
the only reason why I left the 5 minutes was to assess readiness for this draft.
Okay. Okay.
But,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's two ones that are purely optimizations, and that last slide was one of them. If we have time, I'll come back to it. But the other category is, since we got suit people here, let's cover the suit discussions. Okay. Other than Akira already covered one of those. So draft 07 includes Brendan's manifest examples. He went through that last IETF, and so that's sufficient to answer issue 41. But last IETF, Brendan also provided suit reports. And we walked through those last meeting, and the suit reports have not been added into the TEEP protocol spec right now. So that's issue number 170, is to take Brennan's examples that we used in the IETF 111 meeting and put those in the appendix of the TEEP protocol spec 2, which is where the manifest examples already appear. So that's issue number 170. Not going to talk about that because Brennan gave that presentation last time. Then there are two other issues. One is the one that, actually, I think that's the wrong number on there. Oh, no, that's the issue number. He had the pull request number, but it's the same thing. That was Akira's presentation about the 3 types of suit manifests. We've already talked about that in the meeting. But there's another one that he had in the hackathon slide that I'm going to talk about now, which is the one about deleting a trusted component suit manifest. So next slide. Okay. So there's 2 interrelated questions here in this issue as I read it, okay? This has to do with removing, or in the suit working group, we call that unlinking, right? Because it's actually removed when the last link goes away, right? Just you're dropping a ref count, right? The issue in the TEEP GitHub says removing, but we mean unlinking, okay? 2 related questions here. First one for suit is, should a suit parser unlink all the dependent manifests when you all the dependencies when you unlink the dependent manifest, right? So if A references B and you say unlink A, does that automatically unlink B? Or presumably, I'm guessing the answer is only when the ref count on A goes to 0 would you unlink B, right? But that's the question that's in the issue here. And then the second question is, well, TEEP is a protocol for doing things, but what happens if you try to run some alternate thing, like running as, some admin or whatever outside of the TEEP protocol? Is there a way to unlink stuff, and what happens if you do that? Okay, because if you do that, you may be doing it without having a brand new suit manifest that says to delete it. Is it possible to delete a component that was added through suit, a suit manifest, without having a suit manifest that updates it? Okay, or do you have to do it through a suit manifest? That's what Q2 is. Okay. And so option number 1, okay, is you actually require having a new manifest, okay? Even if you're doing it locally, you have to construct a suit manifest that bumps the manifest sequence number, and that's what actually the suit processor is what drops the ref count, right? So the only way to drop the ref count taken by suit is to have a new suit manifest, higher grid sequence number, higher manifest sequence number that drops the ref count, right? That would be option 1. Option number 2.1 has mentioned the issue, but I don't think anybody likes this one, which is you could try to have some suit parser that tries to undo if you have a local undo, then it tries to look at the suit manifest and figure out how to unlink and uninstall it according to all the correct stuff. In general, this one just doesn't work with all suit manifests, and that's why it's there for completeness. But yeah, exactly. Please no screams. Exactly. Yeah. So that one is really, we should cross that one off, and everybody agrees that's not it. Okay. But and then the other possibility is, should there be a suit uninstall so that the same suit manifest that did the install said, should you need to uninstall this later without having a new manifest, here's what you would do. And so if you tried to do something locally and you didn't have to create a new suit manifest, so it's really between option 1 and option 2.2. And this is really a question for the suit working group to weigh in on. Other than the TEEP use case is, you can see the analogy that the filer had is the equivalent of like apt remove-y foo, kind of equivalent for like an admin on the machine. Does he have to do that by generating a new suit manifest, or can you do that by some other means with the actual uninstall commands were embedded in the actual install manifest? And so that's what issue 168 was filed against by our Japanese colleagues, or at least one of them. So feedback on this one, especially from suit folks like Brendan.
Right. And so the issue that bothers me with all of this is a question of privilege. Well, actually, there's two. There's two issues. The first is exactly how do you obtain the privileges to invoke and unlink when you are not the signing author, and that's out of protocol, that's out of document, it's out of manifest. The question is, how do you manage that? When everything's done with manifests, this is pretty straightforward because you are expressing your authority through a signature. But when you don't have that, this looks to me like exactly the thing that some attacker wants to be able to forcibly remove something from your system.
So I can comment on that. And by the way, the default answer is option 1. And so the actual pull request tries to put in some text that just clarifies using option 1. But it's interesting to talk about whether option 2.2 is an option or not. So to answer your question, Brandon, my view is that option 2.2 is not completely out of the question. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea is thing, but and that's because in the TEEP architecture document, okay, there is a trust anchor store. Okay, so the trust anchor store can have one or more keys in it. That's the keys that are used to, like by the manifest signer, for example. Right, so things that are used to run against the actual TAs. Okay, as opposed to say, you know, the signing of TEEP commands themselves, the signing of the suit manifests. And so there's one or more trust anchors in the trust anchor store. Okay, and so the question here in 2.2 that you might be worried about is it really the case that you have to have the same trust anchor signing the uninstall as signing the install? Do you have to remember which trust anchor did it? Or is it just any trust anchor in your store is the one that can do that? And if you think about like key rollover and so on, is it really a trust anchor ID or the actual trust anchor? But if you took a choice that says any trust anchor in the trust anchor store was equally trusted, okay, then as long as the local install comes from one of those trust anchors, it would not have to be the trust anchor that actually signed the suit manifest. I think that's the distinction between option 1 and option 2.2.
Yeah, so I think the take that I have on that is that any equally privileged trust anchor should be able to unlink a manifest. I just on that topic, I thought we were originally doing unlink for components, but we now appear to be unlinking manifests. That was a somewhat unintended consequence, but I think it works. So, I mean, that's all right. But we did originally discuss this as unlinking components rather than unlinking manifests.
I did not think of the distinction when creating the slides, so that may be an error on my part, but it's you're right to call it out. So,
the other factor here is that the question is, where do the links come from in the first place? If you have installed this thing manually, then I guess there's a link that you can unlink. If it hasn't been installed manually, if it's been installed by another manifest, how do you unlink it? is that something you're even permitted to do? So there's a question about link tracking and where these links come from. You can't simply decrement a reference counter every time you call on link, because otherwise you could call on link many times and then leave your system in an unusable state. You can only unlink a link you've created, which means that you can only say apt remove something that you've apt installed, otherwise you break dependencies. So I guess the question is, if you were able to locally install a component, then you should be able to locally remove it. In that case, you probably want a suit uninstall section, not command, section, or command sequence rather. Because otherwise, that I don't see how you would do the unlink. I'm not sure how that would make sense. I think you probably need to have an uninstall command sequence. I don't see another way around it.
So is that something you think that the suit working group should actually add into, and by suit working group, I mean mostly you as the editor, would actually add into the suit manifest ID? Is that what you're thinking based on this discussion? Or into one of the IDs that we got?
Yeah, so I think that would have to go into the trust domains ID because I think it's highly relevant to just almost entirely a situation where you have multiple trust domains, where, just to be clear, TEEP is exclusively a multiple trust domain kind of domain. Yeah, I think it might need to go there. And I mentioned in the suit working group, and I'll mention it again, if anyone else would like to come on and edit that document, they are welcome.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that for now, TEEP should continue to go forward with option 1, but that the 2.2 suit will consider that and discuss it. And I see we got a couple of us suit co-chairs here. And so that would then be a new discussion we would start on the TEEP on the suit mailing list.
I think it would have to. It's so, I mean, the history of suit meant that uninstall wasn't really a question. It was really just for install, because uninstall was typically replacement. So the idea of explicitly uninstalling something was a bit foreign and needs some additional consideration.
Yeah, and thank you for correcting the language here. As I was constructing the slide, it was jet lag this week, and so yeah, that really should say suit uninstall section, even if the text in the issue number says command right now. But this section, yeah, say here's the directives to do an uninstall. Should you need to do an uninstall without having any other information other than the suit manifest? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess we will push that option 2.2 discussion to the suit list. And currently there's an open pull request that puts in some clarifying text, assuming that option number 1 is the way that you have to do it. And so the clarifying text just says, here's what happens when you have the larger, to do this, you do it via new suit manifest. And so it wouldn't actually reference the option 2.2 stuff unless and until suit actually puts something in a document that's referenceable. Ira?
I presume you wanted to move forward.
Yeah, I see Ira in queue though.
Oh, true.
Sorry. Are you actually uninstalling a component, or are you uninstalling a manifest?
Ira, I can't hear you.
I could hear him very faintly saying, are you actually uninstalling a component or a manifest?
Yeah.
I think that's what Brendan was commenting on.
That was what I was asking. Yes.
Yeah. And I think Brendan's comment was either one he thinks would be okay, but I think that's a question for suit. But I think both possibilities are out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Personalization data scenarios. I'm going to summarize where we're at with this one. I don't remember if there's a separate issue number. There may be, and I didn't put it on the slide. So personalization data scenarios that are talked about in either the architecture document or the TEEP protocol document, and make sure we're not missing something here. First scenario for personalization data is where the developer provides both the binary and the personalization data, right? They're packaged separately in some way because the binary is identical that goes to all the different devices. The personalization data is different that goes to different devices, right? But since that's why they're packaged separately, but the same entity in this case is the developer, and A signs both of them. Case B is where it doesn't matter what the developer did, right? The one that actually manages the device is the one that's the actual the trusted signer, right? So the device doesn't trust arbitrary developers. It trusts its own operator and owner, depending on the use case, whether it's an operator or an owner. And so that one provides the binary, maybe gets it from a developer, vets it, signs it itself, generates personalization data, and puts that on there. As far as the protocol is concerned, this is basically equivalent to case A, right? It's a different organization, maybe a different human flow, but as far as the code goes, A and B are basically equivalent, right? It's the same thing. Okay. They're indistinguishable to code, basically. Option C is where they're different entities. So the developer might provide the binary and the operator owner provides the personalization data. So like the configuration stuff, right? What's the set of keys to use, or what's the names, or what's the website to talk to, or whatever it is, right? So so that's where you have different cases. And so in this case, the way shown to do this is that there's a manifest for the personalization data that has the TC binary manifest as a dependency, right? So the operator says, you need to install this personalization data. The personalization data says, well, in order to install this, I got to also install the TC binary, right? And that's so you can have many manifests that point to one. You couldn't do it in the other direction because you'd have one manifest that points to many. It'd be very, very difficult by comparison. And so this is what's in the appendix E.1 example today. Those are all the variations that are discussed today. If there's any variations missing, then please bring up or file an issue or whatever. But I think that's what's covered in the document now. So unless there's any comments at the mic, next slide, please. Okay. Next one is the Cipher Suites question. This one was filed during the hackathon by, I don't remember who. Let's see. So today, the Cipher Suites, in the document right now, it defines a new registry that has two values in it. And it says the TAM has to support both of them, and the TEEP agent gets to pick its choice of either of those. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Okay. It was Asobi-san that filed this. Okay. So during implementation, it was pointed out that there's this one registry in TEEP and a different registry in suit/COSE, and can't we just use the same one so that we don't have to have two different spaces? And so could TEEP just say to use the actual numbering space and values out of COSE, and then that would simplify the code. And so this is an example of what the document might say. This is copied out of Soba-san's proposal, which is, the TEEP COSE algorithms is the COSE algorithm ES256. So those are the two that were on the previous slide, and there's various other ones that are optional. But you can see the way that it's specified it does not create a new registry. And so we would delete the registry if we went with this proposal. And the point is this would simplify implementations. And so any comments on this? This seems like it's a good idea, and Akira briefly touched on this during his presentation. So I'm sure Aina would like not having to have two registries and another expert or something. So unless there's any comments on this one, yes, thank you for clarifying, Asobi-san. Optional just means picking from the existing COSE registry, right? Let's see. I see people going. Okay, +1 from Ira. Long discussion from Ben, but I don't see Ben at the mic, so I don't know if there's anything that needs to be discussed at the mic, Ben. If you don't come to the mic, I'll assume we can just go on. But if you want to say something, go ahead.
I think he's just clarifying.
Okay, next slide then. Because if there's no objections, then I think it's probably a good idea to simplify. So, all right. So suit Cipher Suites. Okay, now we're into the manifest, right? The proposal from the suit meeting, just FYI, if you weren't in the suit meeting, was the suit decided that HSS LMS is actually the must. ECDSA is a should, and you may implement others. Okay, and those are just examples of others that there might be, but there's the must and the should. Okay, that's FYI from the suit discussion early on this week. Next slide. All right. So the next issue from Hackathon that's still related to suit is issue 104. Okay, so here the developer creates a suit manifest that points to the TC binary that the developer created, right? So he hosts it on his own share or wherever he has it, right? So the developer creates his own suit manifest. Okay. So now you have a case where the TAM or the owner or the operator wants to override that URI. Okay. Example, okay, it wants to host the binary itself, right? Maybe the TAM is a TAM for devices that are not on the public internet, right? And so it has a location that's accessible to the devices where the public internet, that original URI might not actually be reachable in that location, right? Think, cruise ship, space, whatever it is, you're in some disconnected network or some network where you don't have reliable connectivity to the outside world, okay? And so you want to host that URI. So how do you override that, okay? And so one way to do this is the TAM just creates a brand new manifest, okay, with the TAM as the signer, okay? And so it just reconstructs that because the trust anchor is the TAM's trust anchor that the device trusts. You could create a brand new manifest that the TAM can construct taking the original manifest, doing a new version, copying most of the fields, replacing the URI and saying brand new one, the developer is actually not in the loop, never even identified, doesn't have to be anyway. And so off you go. So this is a case that I think no document changes would be needed if I understand that scenario correctly. Issue 105 is a way to say, okay, is there a way to reduce the effort to say somehow reference the original manifest and just override the one field and say everything else I'm incorporating by reference, okay? It's this other stuff except for I want to override this one field, okay? And so here the binary is still signed by the original signer, right? Not by the TAM. The TAM is signing the manifest that says that original signer is actually okay. Okay, and I just want to update the URI. And so is this a good idea or a bad idea or some better way to do this? And I see Brennan in queue to answer this. So go ahead.
So I think you may be missing a couple of other options that are available, which might be more appropriate. I'm not sure. So the first one is plain old caching. So as long as you don't use an HTTPS URI, there's nothing to stop you from just caching the binary on some local system. Then you just override it in your transparent cache, and away you go. No problem.
You're saying push the binary down to the device and update its HTTP cache to say, go and look here. I didn't get it through HTTP. I just pushed it down and shoved it in the cache, right?
No, not that. I mean, that's an option as well. That wasn't what I was aiming for. What I meant is that in your own network infrastructure, if you have a transparent cache sitting around, which I'm sure a lot of network infrastructures do, you can use that instead. And then you just override the HTTP request and serve it locally. I know you can't do that with HTTPS, but there's already at-rest security on your if you're using suit encryption. So you might as well just use a cache. It's a much simpler solution, and I realize that we don't talk about it quite so much these days, given that HTTPS has taken over, but it's a simple, viable option, and it's actually kind of the point of having at-rest security on firmware binaries. That's one of the key
couple of their options. Was there others?
Yeah, there's another one. So one of the changes to the suit manifest that cropped up over this one was the use of integrated payloads referenced by a string. And that was specifically so that you wouldn't have to do conversions from the URI to the key in the integrated payload. But the offshoot of that is that you can use that as a pre-caching mechanism. You can then take your target binary, download it in advance as your distribution system, move it into the envelope of your manifest, and make its key in the envelope the URI that's already in the manifest. And then when the device goes to look for it, it first checks if there are any string keys, and if one of them matches, it takes it there. And if not, then it goes out and attempts to do a fetch. So you can do transparent pre-caching. So that might be relevant as well. And as you suggest, a device's local HTTP cache might be relevant too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, I'll look through
I
issue
admit, I did not
105, but
completely follow I did not completely follow the last of your the last of your options here. I only followed parts of that, and so
okay.
it would be useful to write it up on the list. I see we've got 6 minutes left, so you're welcome to try again, or to just put the description on the list. That's fine too. So
all it is that because you've got a string reference in the suit envelope for integrated payloads, that string can simply happen to be the URI that's specified in the manifest. That doesn't require signing authority to do. It doesn't require anything. You can just put it there.
So I guess this might overlap with that discussion we had about examples. To say,
Yes.
you know, do we want an example where we're actually doing that with the binary URI?
Perhaps that would be helpful, yes.
Okay, any other comments on this one? Okay, thank you, Brennan. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So Akira, do you actually want to talk through this one right now, or defer and go on to another topic? The question to Akira. If Akira doesn't, this is your chance. I see. Ken, if you want to say something, you can also come to the mic.
Yeah, my mic wasn't working. Yeah, other topic first. Yeah, this is doesn't have to be. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then we can go on. And it's same for Ken. If you needed to say something, feel free to come to the mic. Otherwise, we'll go on. All right. So yeah. So now we got to the last two. Let's go back to the one slide that I skipped before that was out of order that was supposed to be after this one. So go back to right before the use of suit slide. There's the first of the optimization slides. And feel free to call time because this one is just optimizations. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. This one.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 3 minutes left. So.
Okay. Yep. I got it. I see the clock, but you call time if you want. So, all right. This one says, today, in order to get a query response, you reach out to the TAM with an empty payload. The TAM responds with a query response, and then you can finally with a query request, and then you can send your query response. You have this extra round trip. And so this question is, this is purely an optimization, but if you already know the TAM key or cert, right, whatever you're using to authenticate the TAM, could you send an unsolicited query response to avoid the extra round trip? Okay. Well, obviously you can't do this if there's information that varies in the response, in the request that you actually need to put in the response. So like if you have a token, like you're having a not stuff, your freshness mechanism is nonce, then of course you cannot do this. Okay. But given that we have possibilities of having other freshness mechanisms, right? You can use the epoch ID, you can use timestamp freshness mechanism. And so if you had that, then there's nothing that actually appears in the query request that's different from any other query request that you've gotten from it, okay? And so is it possible to send an unsolicited query response if the query request would contain no information that you didn't already have, okay? And so here's a proposal to address this, okay? That the TEEP agent may send an unsolicited query response to a TAM if all three of the following conditions are true, okay? Because if any one of these is false, then there's a potential problem. So here's the 3 conditions. Number 1, you've gotten a query request already from that TAM, and it contained no token or challenge. In other words, there's no fields that actually vary by things, because those are the only standard fields that vary, right? There's nothing in it that would be different from the one that you got before that, right? So there's no fields that vary. Number 2 is that it didn't send you a process error since you got that query request, because in other words, this one is to cover the case where you sent an unsolicited one and something had changed. The TAM said, there's some error, and of course the TAM just drops it. There's no bad response, and so process error is the notification from the local broker. The HTTP returned that the transport returned an error. So like if it returned error 400 or 500 HTTP, then the broker sends process error up to the TAM agent, right? And so this says you did not get an error from trying to do this before. That's number 2. And number 3 is that the TAM cert or key or whatever is cached and still valid, right? So you can only do it if you actually have all the information you need to authenticate to the TAM, okay? So this is the proposal that if all 3 of those are true, then it's okay to send an unsolicited query response because the extra round trip doesn't actually buy you anything. Any objections? Because the proposal is to put that into the next version of the spec. So And of course, we try to implement that in the implementations before next IETF. So at least one of them. So, all right. Unless there's any comments, then I think we're out of time. We've got like 1 minute left, but I don't think we have time to go to the last one. There's only one more slide.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're done with this slide, I can ask the question to you, Dave.
Yeah, go for it.
You've got a bunch of these comments. You now have a way forward with the EAT claims too. So I'm presuming you're going to continue to resolve these. The question for you is, the protocol spec looks to be maturing.
Yep.
Question is whether there would be value in us doing an early, I could ask the IoT director to do an early review, if you see value in that, after you generate a new revision, by the way.
Yeah, if you can go to the very last slide, which is basically asking that style of questions. So skip any other content slides, just go to the very last one as you're asking that. I think your question is it useful to have an early review, say even before a working group last call, right? And I think, that might be perfectly fine, right? My hope was we could get to a working group last call capable state around IETF 113. That might mean, immediately after 113, but sometime around that time frame. But starting early review, if there's things, I think that would be useful. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, so my question, now that you've posted to 113, we could wait till 113.
I mean, you saw there's still gaps like filling in the rest of the requirements around the EAT profile. I mean, hopefully there shouldn't be anything surprising there, but the text isn't in there, right? And so there may be gaps in the text as opposed to the implementation.
Yeah.
So.
Why don't we
that's
wait
why.
Yeah.
And so now I'm saying we should start working group last call once the number of unresolved issues goes to 0, right? And so whether that happens before or after depends on whether we keep filing new ones in implementation. So.
Okay. So let's shoot for doing the working group last call in 113. And Dido and I can keep pulsing the number of issues that get added.
I mean, best case, right? The issue number goes to 0, but at the time of the internet draft deadline, you could start a working group last call that would terminate at IETF 113 to discuss. So that would be best case.
Okay. Hannes, so we're out of time, but Hannes is saying we should maybe do a hackathon in December. So Hannes, I encourage you to put that on the mail list, and we can figure out how we can move forward in making progress. So you guys have done a great job in ironing out some of these issues. So thank you for that.
Okay. And I see some chat discussion on HSS LMS. Please put that on the list too.
I missed that. Yes. Okay. I want to be respectful of people's time. So I'm 2 minutes over. Thank you, everyone. Great progress to everyone. And until our next time. Thanks again.
All right.
And thanks, Hannes, for the notes.
Thank you.
We'll see a number of you at the RATS working group session in half an hour.
Indeed. Akira, it's late for you and very early for me.
I see.
But for me, it's okay.
Still 11 p.m. Not bad on Friday.
Yeah, I've been waking up at 3 in the morning every morning.
Holy cow.
Wow.
Yeah.
For me, last IETF111 was more difficult because it started from 2 or 3 a.m. and then ended around 6 a.m. and then in the regular office working hours started from 8 or something.
Yeah.
So
that's what's happening to me.
Oh, I see.
Nancy, that's great, isn't it? Because now you lose nothing from your regular workday.
No.
Thanks, Thomas. The fact I've been on calls until 5:30 in the afternoon. Yeah, I don't know about that. And yesterday was a U.S. holiday.
Yeah,
Even better.
yeah.
No conflicts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
I think your boss will reward this.
Well, and so to add insult to injury, I really should not use this as an excuse for why my slides were skim slides.
No, just it was.
My
I noticed it
laptop,
because I'm awake.
my laptop died Tuesday at around 11 in the morning.
Wow.
So I finally brought it back to life around midnight tonight. So I've only been taking 1 or 2 hour naps. So I'm looking forward to the weekend to sleep.
One thing I really wasn't noticing, but I started to realize is having whole week of the IETF, the last day improves my English.
Your English is very good, Akita, and you're right. If I recall from when we started with TEEP, your English has improved. Not that it was bad to begin with.
Yeah, my English not always this good. It's sometimes I don't know what's the difference in my brain. Sometimes it easily comes out. Sometimes it doesn't. But I don't. Yeah. Somehow.
Akira, just think about how our Japanese improved over the lifetime of this working group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Japanese is, I mean, difficult for me too. I mean, I born in Japan. I grew up in Japan, but still, yeah.
You're funny.
Yeah, I mean. Many of the engineers chose engineering subject because they didn't like language and literature class. So I mean,
well, I could say that to be true for me as well. I much preferred the math and sciences than I did to.
Yeah.
In the U.S., they call them the liberal arts, right? So language and history and yeah.
But Nancy, that maybe explains why our documents look the way they are, and they will never reach the Pulitzer Award stage, right?
Yeah, that's true. The truth comes out. Is that right? All right, I'm gonna go refill my bottle of water. See you guys in rats.
Yeah. See you later.
Bye, guys. Well, bye, everyone.
Bye.